There's a silence some men carry, and it's not because they don't feel, it's because they feel too much. Sometimes the man who pulls away is the one who's falling hardest, not because he wants to, but because his soul is speaking a language he's not yet ready to translate. And if you've ever sat there staring at your phone, replaying every conversation, every glance, wondering why one moment he seems so close and the next so far, this is for you. Because love, especially in a man, rarely arrives in perfect words or clear declarations. It shows up in contradictions. It's hidden in the places you almost miss. A look that lingers half a second too long, a deep breath he takes when you enter the room, the way his entire body seems to recalibrate when you're near. He may act casual, he may even act distant, but beneath the surface, something ancient and powerful is unfolding. And sometimes he's far more in love than he dares admit, even to himself. That's what we're going to talk about today. Because I believe, with every fiber of who I am, that women like you deserve to understand the language of the male soul, to see past the walls, past the silences, and into the hidden places where real love begins. So what if the man you're thinking about right now is in far deeper than he realizes? What if his strange behavior isn't indifference, but the chaos that happens when a man's unconscious feelings start rising to the surface? Today I'm going to share with you the hidden signs that he's much more in love with you than he thinks. Signs born not from shallow dating tricks, but from the very depths of the human psyche, from the shadows, the symbols, and the soul itself. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you'll understand why love sometimes looks like distance, why a man's silence may be his loudest confession, and how to recognize when his soul has already chosen you, even if his words haven't yet caught up. Before I reveal those hidden signs, let's talk about why love can be so confusing, especially when it comes to men. Carl Jung, the brilliant Swiss psychiatrist, spent his life exploring the depths of the human soul, and one of his greatest teachings is this: what we do not make conscious emerges in our lives as fate. In other words, we don't always know why we feel what we feel, or why we're drawn to certain people, why we can't let go, or why someone's presence seems to shake something loose in our chest. For men, this unconscious territory can be even more hidden, because many men are taught to separate from their own emotions, to stay logical, practical, untouchable. But love doesn't care about logic. Love doesn't stay polite and contained. When a man begins to fall in love, it doesn't always happen in a place he can access with words. It happens first in the unconscious. Jung believed each of us carries within us something called the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we don't yet see, or we're afraid to admit, and sometimes love comes pouring out of that shadow. There's also what Jung called the anima, the inner feminine in a man's psyche, and when he meets a woman who touches that anima, it can feel like lightning striking his soul. It awakens parts of him he didn't even know were sleeping. But here's the paradox. The more powerful those feelings, the more a man's defenses might rise. His logical mind tries to push away what the soul is craving because it feels too intense, too disruptive, too close to the edges of who he believes himself to be. That's why you might see contradictions. One moment he's tender, the next he's distant. He might stare at you like you're the only woman in the universe, then disappear for 3 days. This doesn't always mean he's playing games. It doesn't automatically mean he's using you or unsure. Sometimes it means he's battling his own unconscious, because when love starts bubbling up from those deep places, the shadow, the anima, the hidden corridors of the soul, it terrifies the part of him that wants to stay in control. He may project his feelings outward without realizing it. Jung called this projection, when we see in another person qualities we haven't fully owned in ourselves. A man might act cool on the surface, while his unconscious is screaming your name. He might avoid you in person, but find himself dreaming about you at night. He might say he just wants to be friends, yet feel protective rage if someone else tries to date you. These contradictions are not random. They're the unconscious trying to reconcile what the heart already knows. And that's what we're here for today. Because if you know how to look, there are signs, subtle, powerful clues that he's much more in love than he consciously realizes. They won't always be spoken. They rarely come in the form of a confession. Instead, they appear in nonverbal moments, shifts in his energy, quiet gestures, unexplained emotions. That's what I want to give you today, a guide to reading the language of a man's soul. So you're not left wondering if you're imagining things, or if there really is something deeper happening between you. And I want to remind you, if you're sensing something real, trust that intuition. The soul often speaks in symbols and sensations long before the mind catches up. Stay with me, because in a moment I'm going to share 9 hidden signs that a man might be far more in love with you than he thinks. And if this is resonating with you, if it feels like someone's finally speaking the language your heart's always known, like this video and subscribe. Not for me, but so this message can reach the women who need it most. The first sign is this: he grows silent around you. Not because he's losing interest, but because he's feeling too much. Most people think silence means absence, indifference, disconnection. But in a man who's falling for you, silence can be the thunder before the storm. You'll notice it happens at unexpected moments. Maybe you've been laughing, sharing stories, and suddenly he goes quiet. His eyes shift away, his breathing deepens. It's as if he's stepped into another dimension. That's because love doesn't just fill him. It overwhelms him. Jung taught that the unconscious is flooded with images and symbols when we encounter someone who activates our deepest feelings. A man might be hit with a wave of emotion he doesn't yet have words for, so he goes quiet, because speaking would mean confronting feelings he's not ready to admit. He might fear saying something too revealing or too vulnerable. His mind goes blank. He withdraws into himself, not because he wants distance, but because he's trying to steady the ground beneath his feet. When he's around you and that hush falls over him, don't panic. That silence might be the place where he's wrestling with the realization that you've already found your way under his skin. That hush is the sound of his soul trembling under the weight of something real. The second sign is this: he becomes inconsistent, not because he's unreliable, but because he's caught between his shadow and his longing. One day he's texting you at midnight, telling you things he's never told anyone. The next day he pulls away, acts casual, as if none of it meant anything. This is one of the most painful patterns for women to endure. It feels like whiplash. But let me tell you the truth. Inconsistency can sometimes be the shadow's dance. Jung said that the shadow contains everything we don't want to face about ourselves: our fears, our vulnerabilities, our desires. When a man starts to fall in love, he enters a battlefield between his conscious identity and the parts of himself he's kept hidden. Part of him longs to move closer to you. Another part recoils in fear of losing himself. So he might show affection one moment, tenderness, warmth, attention, and then vanish into his own mind the next. Not because his feelings aren't real, but because those feelings are too real. This contradiction is agony for him too. You might not see it, but behind closed doors, he's replaying your conversations, questioning himself, wondering why he feels so exposed. He doesn't want to hurt you, but he doesn't yet know how to let you in without losing the armor that's kept him safe for so long. So remember this: inconsistency doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes it's the sign of a man wrestling his shadow and slowly discovering that loving you is worth the risk of being seen. The third sign is this: he becomes hyper-aware of small details about you. Not to impress you, but because your presence has imprinted itself into his unconscious. A man who's indifferent might notice your smile, your laugh, the obvious things. But a man who's falling in love, even if he doesn't know it yet, starts seeing the tiniest details. How your eyes change color in different light, the way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're nervous, that faint catch in your voice when you're trying not to cry. He notices because his psyche is tuning itself to your frequency. Jung spoke of projection, the process by which we invest another person with meaning drawn from the deepest parts of ourselves. When a man projects his anima, his inner feminine, onto a woman, she becomes not just a person to him, but a living symbol. Suddenly, you're everywhere. In his music, in random scents on the street, in the color of the sky at dusk. So he starts remembering small things: that you hate coriander, that your favorite book is dog-eared on page 73, that you once confessed you're afraid of thunderstorms. He may not say it outright, but you'll feel it in the way he brings up something you mentioned weeks ago, or how he seems to sense your mood without you speaking a word. This attention isn't about manipulation or charm, it's the unconscious making meaning. Because once his soul has recognized yours, his entire perception shifts. His senses become alert to you, as if the world itself has been tinted in your colors. And whether he admits it or not, he's carrying you inside him, noticing the smallest echoes of who you are, even when he believes he's not thinking about you at all. The fourth sign is this: he seems strangely protective of you. Not because he wants control, but because, somewhere deep inside, he feels your well-being is tied to his own. A man who's indifferent may be polite, even courteous, but a man whose soul has begun to bond with yours will instinctively slip into a quiet guardianship. It may show up in the simplest ways. He places his hand lightly on your back as you're crossing a crowded street. He notices when you're cold before you say a word. He steps closer when someone interrupts your conversation, subtly creating a shield. It's rarely dramatic. It's not about being macho or dominant. It's about a primal force rising from the unconscious, the sense that your safety and peace have become part of his internal world. Jung spoke of the instinctual forces dwelling beneath the surface. How powerful archetypes drive our actions, even when we can't name them. When a man is falling in love, he often feels compelled to protect the woman who has touched his anima. Not out of possessiveness, but because she has become precious, sacred, intertwined with his sense of self. He may not say it out loud, he may even brush it off if you thank him. But there's a watchfulness in him, a silent vow he's made without even realizing it. When he's truly more in love than he knows, your happiness becomes his quiet priority. Because his soul has already decided that keeping you safe, physically, emotionally, spiritually, is worth any effort. And when you witness that invisible shield he offers, know this: you've already become part of his inner story. The fifth sign is this: he starts revealing his flaws, his wounds, and the parts of himself he's kept hidden from the world, not because he wants your pity, but because his soul is testing if you'll still see him as worthy of love. A man might spend his life wearing masks, confident, capable, untouchable. But love has a way of peeling those masks away. If he's far more in love than he realizes, you'll notice moments when his guard slips. When he tells you stories from his past that carry shame or regret, when he admits fears he's never spoken, when his voice softens as he speaks of mistakes, betrayals, or secret dreams he's not sure he deserves. Jung taught that individuation, the journey of becoming our whole selves, requires embracing the shadow, our hidden fears, our wounds, the cracks we'd rather deny. So when a man begins to show you those cracks, it's not weakness. It's a sign you've become his mirror, the one in whose eyes he hopes he might finally see acceptance. This vulnerability might come out in strange ways. He might laugh while telling you something painful, as if trying to minimize its weight. Or he might avoid eye contact, speaking quickly, embarrassed by his own confession. But the fact that he's speaking at all, that he's pulling fragments of his soul into the light, means you've touched something real. He may not say, "I'm in love with you," but every secret he shares is his unconscious whispering, "I want you to know the real me, and I'm terrified you'll leave if you see it." When you see this sign, understand, a man does not expose his wounds unless something inside him already believes you might be the one who can help him heal. The sixth sign is this: his life begins to shift in subtle ways, as if your presence is rearranging his internal compass. Not because he's trying to impress you, but because love is transforming who he is. You might notice it first in small routines. He picks up a hobby you once mentioned loving. He suddenly shows interest in music, books, or ideas he never cared about before. His schedule changes, his habits soften. None of this is forced. He's not becoming a different man to win you over. Instead, his unconscious is pulling him toward resonance. Jung spoke of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that arise when our inner world aligns with outer events. When a man is falling in love, synchronicities begin to weave through his life. He finds himself drawn to places, people, and experiences that somehow keep leading back to you. Sometimes it's as simple as him craving the peace he feels in your presence. Other times it's more profound. He starts to question the path he's on, the career he's chosen, the the values he's lived by. Because once love has entered his unconscious, his soul begins reorganizing itself to make space for this new bond. He may not understand why he suddenly feels restless in his old routines, or why being away from you feels like being out of alignment. But you'll notice the signs: his curiosity about your world, his willingness to share his own, his slow but steady shift toward a life where you're no longer an outsider, but woven into the fabric of his future. He might not say the words, "I'm changing for you," but his entire being is bending toward you, like a tree growing toward sunlight it can't live without. When a man is more in love than he knows, love doesn't just stay in his heart, it spills into the architecture of his life. The seventh sign is this: he becomes deeply affected by your emotions, not because he's fragile, but because your feelings are now echoing inside him as his own. A man who's only casually interested might feel sympathy when you're sad. But a man who's far more in love than he realizes feels your sadness as if it were happening in his own chest. He may not have the perfect words. He may not know how to comfort you in a way that makes sense. But you'll see it in the way his entire energy shifts when you're hurting. Jung believed that love creates psychic bridges between people, invisible pathways through which emotion flows like electricity. When a man's soul has bonded with yours, those pathways open wide. So if you're anxious, he might grow restless. If you're joyful, he seems lit from within. He might hover near you, wanting to help but unsure how. Or he might become uncharacteristically quiet, carrying your pain inside him because he doesn't yet know how to release it. Sometimes he'll try to fix things. Other times he'll just sit in silence beside you because being close feels like the only remedy. It's important to know, this isn't about codependence. It's about resonance. His soul has tuned itself to yours, and now your inner weather becomes part of his sky. So when you see him go still when you're upset, when his eyes soften as you speak your truth, when he seems to feel your emotions as deeply as his own, know this: he's already carrying your heart inside his own. The eighth sign is this: he finds himself talking about the future, not in grand declarations, but in quiet slips of language where you're simply included. He might say things like, "One day I'd love to see that city," and somehow you're part of the picture. Or, "If I ever moved, I'd want to live somewhere you'd like too." He may not even realize he's doing it. But the unconscious speaks in these small prophetic utterances. Jung taught that symbols and future visions rise from the depths of the psyche, revealing truths we haven't yet dared to admit consciously. So when a man is secretly more in love than he knows, the future begins to bend in your direction, whether he means to plan it or not. Listen carefully to the words that slip out when he's relaxed, when his guard is down. Because those casual mentions of "someday," "we should," "maybe us," are the unconscious laying claim to possibility. They're the soul whispering, "This woman belongs in the story I'm writing." It's not about possessiveness. It's not about rushing commitment. It's about how his entire psychic landscape is shifting to include you. Even if he's not ready for a relationship or says he's not looking for anything serious, these future-oriented slips are clues that he's already imagining a life in which your presence is a given. And that's when you know his soul is moving faster than his conscious mind. The ninth sign is this: he finds peace in your presence, not because you entertain him, but because being near you quiets the noise in his own soul. Many men live with a hum of background tension they rarely confess. Responsibilities, expectations, the pressure to always be fine. But when he's truly more in love than he knows, your presence becomes a kind of sanctuary. Jung spoke of the self, the deepest, most centered part of who we are. When a man's unconscious starts to recognize you as part of his journey toward wholeness, your presence calms him in a way nothing else does. He might not say it, he might not even realize it, but you'll see it in his body language. His shoulders relax, his breathing slows. Time seems to expand around you both. He's not trying to impress you in those moments. He's simply letting himself be real. His defenses drop, his eyes soften. You might notice that he seeks you out during stressful times. Not necessarily to talk, but just to exist near you. He may linger longer than necessary, as if drawn by a force he can't name. This peace is not excitement. It's not butterflies or lust. It's deeper. It's the sense that with you, he doesn't have to perform. He doesn't have to be more or less than he is. When a man finds peace in your presence, even without saying a word, it means his soul has found home. And that, more than any romantic gesture, is the surest sign he's far more in love than he thinks. So here's what I want you to remember. A man's soul often speaks long before his mind has the courage to translate its truths into words. The contradictions you see, the silences, the sudden closeness, the moments he seems distant, then achingly tender. These are not random. They are the evidence of a battle being fought inside him, between who he thought he was and who his soul is slowly becoming in your presence. True love rarely arrives in perfect declarations. More often, it arrives hidden inside glances and hesitations, in subtle acts of care, in the way his world begins bending ever so slightly toward yours. You are not crazy for sensing this. You are not foolish for reading into his quiet moments or the way his eyes soften when you laugh, because intuition is the language of the soul. And your soul knows when it's being recognized. Jung taught that the unconscious never lies. And when a man is secretly more in love than he knows, his unconscious will betray him every single time, in the way he shows up, in the way he tries to protect you, in the tiny futures he imagines with you there. Don't let anyone convince you that love is only real when it's loudly declared. The deepest kind of love lives in the space between words, in presence, in small acts of devotion that cost him nothing, and yet somehow cost him everything. If you're seeing these signs, it doesn't automatically mean he's ready to confess his feelings. Some men take longer to lower the drawbridge around their hearts. Some spend years wrestling with shadows before they let the truth surface. But know this, his soul already knows. Love isn't a choice we make with our logical minds. It's an ancient pull, a gravitational force, a silent yes spoken from the marrow of who we are. And if a man is showing you these hidden signs, the hush, the contradictions, the protectiveness, the quiet future glimpses, the deep peace, it means that somewhere inside, his soul has already chosen you, even if he can't yet say the words. So trust what you feel. Trust the silent language your heart has always known how to speak. And remember, the most powerful confessions of love are sometimes the ones that never reach his lips, because they've already been spoken in every action, every look, every stillness he shares with you. Because sometimes, the soul chooses long before the mind ever dares to speak. If this spoke to your soul, stay close. Subscribe. There's more coming. Not advice, but reminders of the love that's always been waiting inside you.